Greetings, Fright fans. Dr. Gangrene, physician of Fright, Nashville horror host here. Scary Christmas to all of you out there. We're feeling rather festive here in the lab tonight. Got my nice Christmas jacket on. As you can see, we've got the lab decorated rather festive here to help get in the spirit. There's plenty of spirits around here. Spirits, ghosts, poltergeists, you name it. But tonight, we're going to look at the top 10 Christmas horror movies of all time to help you get in the cruel tide spirit too. So with that in mind, Christmas horror movies have become all the rage lately. There's tons of them. It seems that every time I turn around, a new Christmas horror movie is popping up, and that's a good thing. But we're going to count down the very best of the best, the top 10, my personal top 10 favorite Christmas horror movies. And I want to get that started with an honorable mention because this particular film is a true classic in the genre. The very first version of it was made in 1901, and I'm talking about Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Of course, A Christmas Carol is about Ebenezer Scrooge, the miserly old man who is visited by three ghosts, actually four spirits, who help teach him the true meaning of Christmas. It is a classic story. It's been done hundreds of times throughout the years, and I tell you, talk about staying power. There's got to be something to a film that's remade hundreds of times. The number 10 movie in my countdown is a really fun little movie from the 1980s. I'm talking about To All a Good Night. This film takes place at the Calvin Finishing School for Girls, where most of the girls are headed home for the holidays, but a handful are sticking around throughout the break to party with a group of boys headed to meet them there. But, as happens so often in films on this list, there is a killer dressed as Santa who begins hacking up the co-eds and burying their bodies in the backyard. Directed in 1980 by David Hess, best known as the Maniac in Last House on the Left. This was the only film he directed and an early entry in the genre, coming out the same year as Christmas Evil, but this one was released first and is the first feature film with a killer Santa. It has a high body count, lots of nudity, and is an entertaining, low-budget Christmas slasher. Number 9 on our Christmas horror countdown is a naughty little 80s import, Don't Open Till Christmas. Released in 1984, this is a particularly sleazy Christmas slasher from merry old England, directed by Edmund Purdom, who also stars as a police inspector in this one, trying to crack the case of the Santa murders, where someone who really doesn't like Christmas is going around offing anyone wearing a Santa outfit. The bodies begin to pile up, and we eventually learn the identity of the killer, as well as the reason behind his bloody rampage, which was lifted straight from the better-known Christmas Evil. Carolyn Monroe appears briefly as a singer of a band in a nightclub. Overall, a fun little low-budget gem with a nice twist of someone killing Santas instead of the other way around. Don't Open Till Christmas should be unwrapped for anyone's Christmas horror marathon. Number 8 is another 80s classic. It's become a fan favorite throughout the years, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. This film opens on Ricky, the younger brother to the killer in the original Silent Night, Deadly Night, now grown up and housed in an insane asylum, telling his story to a psychiatrist. Ricky was adopted after the terrible events of the first movie and tried to live a normal life, but snapped and began killing people he felt were naughty. He murders the psychiatrist and breaks out of the asylum to continue his killing spree, headed straight for the residence of the mean nun from the first film, Mother Superior. Released in 1987 and directed by first-time director Lee Harry, this film is cheesy and violent and a ton of fun. Unplug your brain and enjoy it for what it is. Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 is a must-see holiday movie, followed by 3 more sequels, Silent Night, Deadly Night 3, 4, and 5, which are all increasingly wacky and better than you might think. Garbage Day! Number 7 is a more recent entry into our countdown and one that I've actually fallen in love with. It's a fantastic little film called Rare Exports, A Christmas Tale. Made in 2010 by Finnish director Jalmari Helander, it tells the story of a mining company that is secretly attempting to excavate a buried secret. Old Saint Nick himself, which it turns out is no jolly old elf, but instead a giant horned creature that revels in punishing naughty children. And he is served not by elves, but by hordes of naked old men. One young lad in particular named Pietari figures out what is happening, and when the children of the town begin to disappear, he must convince his father and find a way to stop the revival of this ancient legend. A wonderful film and a really clever take on the Saint Nick mythos, presenting him as almost some giant elder god from Lovecraftian mythos. Definitely one of the more creative films in the list and worth checking out. Number 6 is a fan favorite set in the Christmas season and a lot of fun. Gremlins. Made in 1984 by director Joe Dante, this one tells the story of a small furry creature bought in a Chinese antique shop called a mogwai that turns out to be anything but cute and cuddly when it gets wet or eats after midnight, which causes it to morph into a reptilian-looking creature and replicate, which quickly turns into a horde of scaly monsters wreaking havoc on the entire town during the Christmas season. This is a black comedy which, while featuring cute animatronic critters and puppets, was definitely not a simple kids movie. Some of the shenanigans of the creatures are vicious and violent, and the whole thing has a wonderful dark tone to it. Number 5 is one of my very personal favorites and one I have to watch every year, Tales from the Crypt and All Through the House. This story was presented in the 1972 horror anthology film Tales from the Crypt from Amicus Studios. The first story of this horror anthology film from Amicus Studios features an escaped lunatic from an insane asylum in a Santa outfit stalking a woman, played by Joan Collins, in a house on Christmas Eve. This woman had just so happened to murder her husband earlier that evening and can't call the police for help. The film was made in 1972 by Amicus Studios and directed by Freddie Francis. All of the segments are based on EC Comics stories. It is one of my favorite anthology films of all time, and this segment in particular was hugely influential on the subgenre of Christmas horror, spawning many imitations over the next few decades, including a made-for-TV remake in 1989. But this was the original Killer Santa, a must-see for holiday horror fans. Number 4 is another newer film that's custom made for those naughty folks out there. I'm talking about Krampus. Based on a creature from Germanic folklore, this film tells the story of a demonic creature called Krampus that punishes those who have lost the Christmas spirit. A family is attacked at Christmas by evil elves. Toys come to life, and the big guy himself, Krampus. It was directed by Michael Dougherty in 2015, director of the Halloween classic Trick or Treat. A much bigger budget film than most on this list, the special effects are fantastic, and despite the horror involved, it has a warm spirit at heart. Number 3 is an early entry in the Christmas horror genre and one of the very best. Some people consider it the best, including John Waters. I'm talking about Christmas Evil. Christmas Evil tells the story of a man named Harry who is completely obsessed with Christmas. He's also a deeply disturbed person, hearkening back to an early traumatic experience when, as a young boy, he saw his mom getting busy with Santa one Christmas Eve. Now grown up, he works in the toy factory and is surrounded by Christmas memorabilia all year long. One Christmas, he decides to sew his own Santa suit and goes out to deliver Christmas gifts. But when a group of snobby churchgoers begin mocking him, he snaps and murders them in front of a crowd of people. He flees, then begins to spread his own version of Christmas cheer, killing people who have mistreated him. Hailed by John Waters as the greatest Christmas film of all time, this is a terrific film and essential Christmas viewing. It has a bit of a fairy tale quality to it, especially the ending. It reminds me of something straight out of a Tim Burton movie.
All right, Merry Christmas, Frank.
Number 2 is a true classic in the genre and a pretty controversial film in its time. I'm talking about the original Silent Night, Deadly Night. A boy named Billy sees his parents murdered in front of him by a man in a Santa suit. He grows up in an orphanage which is run by a mean nun named Mother Superior. Billy has emotional problems, in particular a severe aversion to Christmas and Santa Claus, which causes him to get into trouble often and punished. Years later, he is trying to re-assimilate into society and takes a job at a department store. The manager forces him to dress as Santa, which causes him to snap. Billy goes on a murderous rampage, still dressed in his Santa suit, punishing those who were naughty. This film was made in 1984 and directed by Charles Sellier. It was highly controversial when released because of the Santa theme and the violence in the film. It garnered negative reviews from top critics and sparked protests and was eventually pulled from theaters. There were 4 sequels made to this movie. Part 2 is the best of the bunch, notable for the amazing line, "Garbage Day." It was remade in 2012 as Silent Night.
Christmas Eve is the scariest damn night of the year.
The #1 film on our Christmas horror countdown is my personal favorite Christmas horror movie of all time. I'm talking about the original Black Christmas. This film opens at Christmas time with a stranger sneaking into the attic of a sorority house. Shortly thereafter, the girls in the house begin receiving obscene phone calls, then are murdered one by one. A police lieutenant, played by John Saxon, leads the investigation and tries to trace the calls and catch the killer. This Canadian slasher film was shot in 1974 and directed by Bob Clark, the director of A Christmas Story, Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and Porky's. It's a fantastic film that's widely recognized as the first slasher film. It's moody and atmospheric and has a low-budget, independent feel that just makes it work even better for me. It features some terrific performances from Olivia Hussey and Margot Kidder as 2 of the sorority girls. It is also the best Christmas horror film ever made, an influential movie that spawned not 1 but 2 remakes. But this is the original and the #1 film for me to watch every Christmas. So that's it, Fright fans, the top 10 Christmas horror movies of all time. If you want to watch a Christmas horror movie to get you in the howliday spirit, then this is the list for you. For some of you out there, I challenge you to go through this list and watch every one of these films this Christmas season. If you do, let me know in the comments down below. And also let me know in the comments if I missed a movie that you think should be on this list. I always love seeing what other people consider to be classics on countdowns like this. You know, everybody has their own personal opinions. There's no right and wrong, except my list is right. So, now this is my personal favorites. This is it. And you can't get any better than Black Christmas. The original Black Christmas is just the ultimate Christmas horror movie, and it was the first. So there you go. Well, except for A Christmas Carol, which was our honorable mention. And so anyway, that's it. Let me know what you thought about this. Be sure and click subscribe. And until next time, Dr. Gangrene saying Scary Christmas and stay mad.